out, log back in. Probably didn't have to do that. I could have just clicked the other course. Then we go to 1302, and these instructions actually work. The ones that come with your code pack do not. So those who followed these instructions last semester, those instructions should continue to work. Now, the very default option at the top of the page is how to register with Blackboard. At a certain point down below, it switches to Canvas, which is a completely different online learning system than Blackboard. So once you hit here, stop, because you've already seen all you're going to see. But essentially what it tells you to do is go to the course, log in, click your course, and then look for one of these type of assignments that have the little squigglies. Can you see the squigglies? Little flag squigglies? Is it too tiny? Can you see that? Okay, now we're going to go back out because that's frightening. In fact, that's way too big still for me. It might ask you to do some pop-up blocker stuff, just disable pop-up blockers on the site, and then read all these probably 12 pages of legal terms, like you do every time that you see a terms of service. Click agree 3 hours later when you're done reading it. And then log in with your Launchpad account or register with the Launchpad account. So it's going to have you use the, I believe, I don't know exactly what. Oh, since you're clicking out from Blackboard, it should automatically pair the Blackboard account. That's why it's the best way. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult trying to get your grades paired from Launchpad over to Blackboard. But if you follow this method and click out from an assignment, so if you go over hitting List 1302 Lab, and the very first way you sign up is you click this pretest, it will take you out to Launchpad. It'll ask you for your email address. You enter your email address, and they'll check and see if you already have an account from a prior semester. If you do, it'll set you up, and you'll just connect it that way. I just thought of something. If you had I don't know if you had another email. And you were like, crap, I already used my free trial on a prior semester.
Labs are in there.
How many labs are in there? Here's the thing is, I noticed whoever made the labs for this time did something different than last time, so I've got to go in and mess with it a little. Because it looks like they've assigned where you have to do them like videos to watch. But I usually only make it just the learning curve stuff, just the quizzes. So I haven't activated the course yet, and I plan to activate it this afternoon. And I wanted to have the chance to talk to you about Launchpad first before I activated it. But I also want to go in and get rid of those things you don't have to do first, because I don't know why they're there. And additionally, I don't see them here. So if I click in the argument section, no, they've assigned all these other things. Just note that the only thing you're actually graded on is these learning curves. Okay? So when it says learning curve, that's the only thing that actually gives you a grade. The rest is you could click on checklist, but you won't get anything out of it. But if it says learning curve, that's where your grades come from.
For the actual assignments.
Good call, Mark Smart. You go to grades. Down here, it says all the things you get grades on. Accessing PJC library test?
What?
Sounds like a communication there.
Ah, it's a trick. I guess there's one thing you have to do that's not learning curve related that you get a test for as part of your lab grade. It's crazy. I guess, but do it. I guess it just says how do you get to the thing. So descriptive. Next. Yeah, learning curve assignments only. That's what you get graded on. Any questions before we move on to what we're doing today? I believe this is the class. I'm just moving on now. This is the class where we did not read that story of an hour story, right? I said we would. Okay, so we're going to do that. I did, however, read through the sample essay, right? Did I not do that either?
No, I think you were getting to that point last time, and you couldn't get it because of time right now.
Okay, so that means that we were here. We went blah, 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 snakes and stuff, yeah? Oh, it's a hognose snake. Did we see the snake that plays dead?
Yes.
Okay. Lots of snakes. We see them in different ways. Zero at the bone. I talked about zero at the bone, the cold feeling, right? We saw a broken finger. We saw a spider. Happy place. And then literature writers see the world in a very unique way, and they can convey that to us, and that's what's so great about literature. So we're going to read Story of an Hour. Did I show you all a picture of my family?
Yes.
So we did talk about how that factors into but we hadn't read Story of an Hour yet, so I said I'm not going to go into full detail on this now. I tried to with some other thing. It wasn't as relevant. Yeah, let's do this. So Story of an Hour. You don't have to find it in your book because it's not there. Actually, it might be, isn't it?
It is there.
Page 555. Additionally, though, I'm going to have it because it plays better on the video. I'm going to have it up here on the screen. Now, one risk you take, many of you have asked me, I don't have this book yet. Can I find this literature online or somewhere else? You can. But if you'll note with, like, say if I read Story of an Hour here, there are some problems with it. The text translation, it's not translation, but it's not exact, and there's actually some problems. Like right here, under hete breath, I don't even know if that's supposed to be her, the, under the breath, free. But there's always a risk you take in relying on somebody's typed out version of the story that they get everything accurately. Probably one of the reasons that, like if you were ever going to, say, share a Bible verse with somebody, you wouldn't go with like Yahoo Answers, right? What somebody said there. You probably go to your copy of the Bible, check the verse, copy it from your Bible app or something. Because to me, like stories are church, you know. That it's important that they be in their proper form. But so I can show them on the screen, I have this digital version that nonetheless has a few problems. Everybody's like, why do you mention church? Yeah, I'm still not sure. So, Story of an Hour, it's not very long. It's this long. That's it. But it's something we can talk about all semester because it provides a pretty good example of, you'll see. The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin in 1894. That's relevant to the story. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. And she wept at once, with sudden, wild abandonment in her sister's arms. And when the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. She could see in the open square before her house the tops of trees that were all aquiver with the new spring life. A delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dreams. She was young, with a fair, calm face, whose lines bespoke repression and even a certain strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it, fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name. But she felt it, creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her 2 white slender hands would have been. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. She said it over and over under her breath. Free. 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 The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that had held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death. The face that had never looked save with love upon her, fixed and gray and dead. She saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely. And she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers, and that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. And yet she had loved him. Sometimes. Often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the face of this possession of self-assertion which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? Free, body and soul, free, she kept whispering. Now Josephine was kneeling before the door, closed door, with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louise, open the door. I beg, open the door. You'll make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louise? For heaven's sake, open the door. Go away. I am not making myself ill. No. She was drinking in a very elixir of life through that open window. Her fancy was running riot along those days ahead of her. Spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. She rose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the front door with a latch key. It was Brentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident, did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. And when the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. And that's the end. That's the end of the story. She's dead. So, I think there's something that this little story provides us to talk about in terms of literature. There are two types of interpretation, I think. One is the interpretation of what do I feel about this story. It's kind of what I want you to do in your discussion posts. However, there are definitely ways in which literature can be gotten wrong, but usually only if you ignore details. So I think what we're meant to get out of this last sentence, and a lot of students say, well, the doctors were right because they're doctors. The joy killed her. She was so happy to see her husband, she just died. But we've had nothing but a page before that said how happy she was to finally be free. And I would ask you, and there's no right answer to this question, I just want to see if you caught the information. A lot of students will... Why do you think she was so happy to be free of him? Do you think there was a certain way that he treated her? I mean, how do you think he treated her? Maybe abusive? If you read back on the story really slowly, I mean, it all comes so quick the first time, but it's such a short story, I've had a chance to read it over and over and over again. The first time I thought maybe he was abusive to her, so I read it over again to check and see.
Controlling as well.
controlling. I think that he probably was. But if you look, she says, and I think that the author's careful to approach it in this way. There's so much packed into this short space. She says here she did not stop to ask if it were not a monstrous choice. So she didn't stop to think about whether she was a monster for feeling this way. She knew she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death. So overall, she thinks of her husband as a kind man. He's kind. He's tender. The face that had never looked save with love upon her. So it had never looked at her without eyes of love. So that he literally loved her, and he had never looked at her in a bad way. So I think that gets rid of our notions of possible abuse here. However, like you say, there would be nobody to live for during those coming years. So in the 1890s, I assume that the husband-wife relationship was very much husband's doing the work, he's in control, the wife's at home. So she had nobody to live for anymore. She's not like, oh, I just live for my husband. And there would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. And maybe you don't, or you do or don't know how marriage works. But you probably have parents and you've seen how their marriage works. But generally speaking, my wife, I guess, I mean, maybe she doesn't feel all that lucky that I don't have a bunch of guy friends. But I imagine there's a lot of people who, I mean, she's like, why do you always want to read books? I'm like, English teacher. She's like, yeah. But what I don't do is I don't say, honey, things are kind of lame around here. I'm going to go and drink with my friends till probably like 2 a.m. And then we're going to drive home. I don't know if we're going to drive when we should be driving, but we're going to hopefully make it home and not be dead or arrested. And her just be like, okay. Rather than that happen in most marriages, I think these days, especially millennial marriages, which are more like giving, and I feel like maybe my parents' generation, maybe your parents' generation, still more of that traditional like husband-wife relationship. But mine is more like, me and my wife, we both work, and it's kind of how it is now, and we both have desires. Now, granted, we are still in that mode where she's in charge of the laundry, mostly because I would screw it up. But I'm perfectly capable of washing dishes, cooking dinner, those sorts of things. She likes my dinners. I let her do desserts, though, because she likes her desserts better. I don't know how she makes them sweeter. Maybe she just throws extra sugar in and doesn't tell me. Kind of like I do with olive oil and salt. You can fix a lot of stuff that's not good with olive oil and salt. Enjoy salt while you can, because later the doctor will tell you can't eat salt. But there is this thing where I don't just leave the house because I'm the man and I will leave the house and you will let me. It's not that. Nor do I just say, honey, I feel like wondering, like what, nor would she say this to me. I kind of feel like pursuing sex with another person just tonight, just to see what it's like. You cool with that? Oh, yeah, sure. No. That's it. It's now an exclusive thing,
Would you say it just like that?
I'm assuming if there were people who had those open relationships, perhaps. When I hear the word open relationship, I'm like, okay, so you're lying to yourself. I'm sure people make it work, but I can't perceive of it. Because there is that sort of, like, what does she call it? That blind persistence with which many women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. I do think that she's off the market now, as she probably thinks about me. She definitely thinks about me. This is, now this is what you do. This is your life. Can I just go to the movies alone? No. You don't do that anymore. You go to movies with me. But you don't want to see the movie I want to see. It doesn't matter. Neither one of us gets to see it then. This is marriage. It's just one of those things where, like, now we make concessions for each other all the time. There's that push and that pull. And she's like, I did not realize until my husband was dead. I didn't like the push and the pull. It's not necessarily that he's a bad guy. He loves her. And I think it's important to, when you're doing the literature, like, if you've got an interpretation of it, if you say, this is how the author feels, or this is right or this is wrong, the only thing that really matters to you, if I'm going to think that you're making an interpretation that I think is valid, is that you're not ignoring details in the story. There was some, I don't know if y'all saw this original post, but somebody made an original post about Rose Fremley. And they said, the most intriguing thing I found about the story was the necklace that she was wearing. And I was like, in Rose for Emily. And I just responded to that person, really? You didn't find it at all intriguing that she murdered her lover and slept next to his dead body for like 20 years? That didn't strike you. But man, that necklace. You know when the necklace appears? It's like in the first page of the story.
Yeah.
So he probably was like, I got crap to write. Type. Okay, good. Whew. Made it. Damn. I don't know why I felt need to curse. gotta get that necklace. He was mentioning too, like somebody who wears like chains. I don't know, like rap artists, and I was just like, okay, so somebody's obviously not paying attention. They're just like, I gotta write something. But I could tell that if I was to ask him about the story, have a conversation with him, he would be missing key details of the story to come up with an interpretation. So if you haven't read it, I mean, that's going to be a harmful thing. And in fact, if you're going to be writing an essay about it, it's probably a good idea to read over one of those stories again, just to make sure you've got all those details. So I did have, I've had some people completely get details wrong before, and while I did like what they were saying about the story, I said, well, it's your foundation upon which you're making this assumption is based on information in the story is wrong. Like it's like you thought that this character was a male instead of a female. That makes a big difference. And so I've had that happen before. So as long as you're reading the details of the story, understanding them all, and using that to come to your interpretation, I think that all of our interpretations are valid. In fact, the thing I want to ask everybody is, after hearing this story, do you think that, well, first of all, I think that with interpreting the details of the story, you have to come to the assumption that she died of utter disappointment at seeing her husband be alive, right? And we talked about the fake discussion post of Magnus Baraka. Do you feel like she's a monster for having that thought? And keep too, he doesn't walk in the door and shit and go, you're alive, I'm going to murder you. Nor does she kill herself. It's a physiological reaction of the heart where it just breaks at the sight of her husband being alive. So with that in mind, do you think that her inside thoughts, the joy, the pure joy she felt at knowing her husband was dead, do you feel that makes her sort of a monster?
Well, if you take into account the time that this was written and the setting of how it is, you have around the 1890s, during that time, arranged marriages were still a thing. So it's possible that she didn't even want to be in this marriage to begin with, and that's why she feels this way.
It may have been, I think we probably had moved to the informal arrangement scenario where it's expected she would get married to somebody and her parents were like, oh, look at that guy. That very well could be a thing. But does it make you think she's a monster? So it sounds like you're leaning toward no. I mean, she's right to feel the way she feels. On the fence?
It's on the fence because even if, like, she said she loved him, but at the same time she didn't. So if you don't love somebody, if you don't even like them, then if all of a sudden you get told they're dead, they're not going to be in your life anymore. First reaction, even if you don't like them, is going to be, oh, they're dead. And then the next and then after a little while of actually sitting on that, you're going to they realize, this might actually be better for me than it needs to be. But she's getting excited and she's feeling happy about the fact that someone just died in her life.
I don't think necessarily that. I think she's getting excited of her future.
Like her freedom?
Yeah, not excited of like, oh, he died, because it does say that, she did love him, or sometimes she didn't. But it did say, what did it say? Now I'm like lost.
Often she had loved him.
Often she had not.
Oh no, she said she had loved him.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
Often she had
Often
not.
she had not.
Which is why I lean towards that was an arranged marriage that she didn't want to be in. So she was kind of forced into the marriage.
One thing I would caution people a little against is adding to the story. I know that marriage would work different then. I don't know the exact nature of her marriage. It could have been arranged, maybe not. It definitely was at a time, though, when there weren't progressive. This is pre-World War, where it's like, women are going into the workforce. We at least know that. Women aren't a significant portion of the workforce. That's the stuff I think that we know. I mean, I don't even know if we necessarily can assume that she's a religious person, because people might have been more religious back then. But I don't know if we can say that it was an arranged marriage. It may have been expected she'd get married. But it's important too to me for your interpretations not to add details onto the story. Like there's a lot of, especially with the stories we had this week, like Rose for Emily, like what ifs. What we know of Rose for Emily is, where is Rose for Emily? It's very early on. Rose for Emily. I don't know why I'm saying it so slowly when I haven't even found the page yet.
497.
497. Thank you all for the numbers. So 497. Where's that little bit about Homer? Homer. Her father died. For rats. Where are you? She got in stuff. We said they are married. Was gone. Cousins. He was back in town. Where's the part where it says about the company of men? Where does it say that? Do anybody know where that is? With Homer? Oh, here we go. It's in section 4, page 502, in the very first paragraph in section 4. Says, so she got the arsenic, and so the next day we all said, oh, she will kill herself. And we said it would be the best thing. What a mean town. When she had first begun to be seen with Homer Barron, we had said, oh, she will marry him. And then we said, she will persuade him yet. Because Homer himself had remarked, he liked men. And it was known that he drank with the younger men in the Elks Club, and that he was not a marrying man. And now, some people have interpreted that to mean, yes, he definitely was a homosexual. It doesn't necessarily say that. It says he liked the company of men, drinking with younger men. It's not the kind of guy you get tied down. Like I mentioned just a minute ago, a dude always goes out and drinks with his buddies. It's going to be hard to put a rein in on that guy, and she's one of the old debutantes of the town. It's going to be an expectation of being prim and proper, and we have to put on the show because we're an old family. But we said poor Emily, and it's down in the South, and they're speaking very flippantly about that. I mean, you would think that there would be a lot more resistance to the idea of a homosexual man, that he drank with the young men. I think it sounds more like he's just like, the only thing we can really confirm here is that he really didn't take to hanging out with Miss Emily as much as maybe they would have liked for a marrying situation. But some people say, oh, he's definitely a homosexual. It doesn't say that, really. There are interpretations online that say that, but I don't know if we can't say definitively that that's the case.
Is it basically saying he's an older guy who just wants to keep acting young? Is that what it's trying?
Yeah, he's not the kind of guy you can pin down. I mean, yeah, he's just... He drinks. He hangs out with younger guys. He's not a marrying type. And that's kind of what I get out of it. And a lot of people said, oh, he's definitely homosexual. I think you can say it's possibly he's homosexual. I think that's definitely true. He may be like, oh man, why did I think about that? It's horrible. Think about a non-creepy Kevin Spacey. You know what's happened with Kevin Spacey lately is that he's he I don't know if he is a homosexual, but he definitely has homosexual tendencies, and he's preferred actually younger guys who maybe even are below 18. I'm talking about somebody who maybe just likes to hang out with younger men and like they're 18 to 21 or so, and maybe that's just what he does, and maybe that's his form of homosexuality. He's always liked the young, youthful male types. But maybe he's not. Maybe he's just a dude who likes hanging out with younger guys and makes him feel young. But either way, it doesn't seem as though he's the marrying type for Emily, and they're like, oh my gosh. But it's one of the reasons that I think, and what were people saying right before I brought that up? Because there was a reason I brought it up.
Different points of view.
Yeah.
Only don't make any.
Someone added any special details.
Don't add to the story in order to make your point stick, basically. So read what's there, do your best of reading what's there, and I actually would be okay with somebody interpreting that as he's a homosexual, but the story, notice that that's not what that story is about. The story is not about how Emily killed a man because he was homosexual, which I got, some people were writing, it seemed on their discussion posts, were making that assumption. Like she was pissed off he was homosexual, and so she killed him, but then why would she sleep beside him? It seems to me more to her that she loved him. He didn't love her in quite that way. And she's like, well, I can't let him leave. Arsenic? What's it for? For rats. And she might mean, well, he's a dirty rat. He wants to leave me. And I won't let him. But regardless, I mean, we don't 100% know from that one little tiny bit, like, oh, because some people, I think, when they were reading the stories, were doing that. You were feeling like you found the key to unlock the story. And it should be like more like you develop an opinion based on what you see, not you're adding to the material something that's not actually there. I mean, you can say like he may have been homosexual. I don't know if you can say that he is. It's very important to be sensitive to the details of the story and not insensitive to. I had one person get the main character's name wrong, which is not good. You don't want to do that. Then I can't tell if you read it all. But let me see. What was I talking about? So the blind will, the persistence. So I think one thing that the thing that I like you to concentrate on in those discussion posts, there were some errors that I noticed were going on. Not necessarily. I mean, I still graded people pretty well on that. Let's see. I made the Launchpad notes. Okay. Some people, beyond just the problem of misinterpreting things or adding details that weren't there. Like, for example, I had a student who, I don't think we can go back and look at this, but as one of the students said that this was set in Jefferson, Texas, Rose Frimley was, because there was a mention of the Battle of Jefferson, and she went and Googled it, and there was a Battle of Jefferson in Jefferson, Texas. That's not what he was talking about. The main city in his fake county he created up called Yoknapatawpha County, Mississippi. He set all of his stories there. And in one of the pages of his book, he's got his fake county there. And you can see like they've essentially located all his books somewhere. There's the Tallahatchie River that was prominent and then the Yoknapatawpha River. This is Jefferson, the main city, and you can notice very close to main Jefferson, a Rose Frimley takes place. So this is Jefferson and Yoknapatawpha County, Mississippi, 1945. The county doesn't actually exist. It's not a real county. He made it up for his stories. So all of his stories take place in a fake county he created. Rose Frimley does too. Huh?
I said he must have been a sadist to make a made-up county that's impossible to pronounce.
Maybe. It is the Chickasaw Indian word for water runs slow through flat land.
Oh, it actually means something?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what
So it's not completely sadistic. He probably was still like, nobody's going to be able to say this. But he did give it a meaning. And if you think it's a pretty good metaphor for the South, if you think about it, right? Water runs slow through flat land. Other parts of the country always change things before we do. We're very cautious. You know, up north they're like, gay marriage. That's got to work, right? Be fine. Down here we're like, not so sure. Let's see how it works out for the north. And then somebody says, gay marriage is legal. And we're like, yeah, all right. You know, it's kind of, we're always like the last people to take something up in the South because water runs slow through flat. We don't have a whole lot of motivations to change things greatly. We're more cautious people,
But
I think, just in general.
Like a protest like a month later after it happens.
Yeah, somebody's always protesting somewhere. But eventually, things, I've just noticed over time, if you look at it, a lot of time summarizing the plot on the discussion posts, please don't do that. I know what the story's about. All I really don't know is your opinion on it. So you could spend your whole time on the discussion post, the original post, on your opinion. I don't need to know the plot because I already do. So use your opinion about the plot to show that you've read it. Don't use your just telling me the plot to show me you've read it. Because, I mean, you can just go get the plot from SparkNotes if you really wanted to. I can't tell anything about your interaction with the story. Yes?
So do you want a I like the book, I don't like the book, or like I like this part of the book because I don't like this part because like that.
That's fine. It doesn't even have to be always I liked. It could be something like I found it very strange that, or it's interesting that he included this idea. This character kind of pissed me off. I feel a lot of similarities between me and this character, or something like that. It can be like,
we were talking about it.
yeah, just kind of like you're just talking about, like anybody would talk about it. It doesn't have to be like a like don't like thing. I know that the internet's tried to teach you, but that's what I'm supposed to boil everything down to, right? Like, don't like, thumbs up, thumbs down, up vote, down vote. Facebook even for a little while was like either you like it or we just don't necessarily like it. Like, and they finally did they have thumbs down on Facebook yet?
They used to.
Oh, now they have emojis, right?
Yeah, they got the emoji.
You're like I don't like this at all.
Well, they took out the thumbs down button like a long time ago.
It's still in
They only
Messenger
left.
though.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, like if somebody sends you a message and you can thumbs down and you don't have to.
Yeah, they're thinking about linking Messenger and Instagram and WhatsApp so they can all communicate with each other.
And they just announced that they were doing it.
I think they did, yeah. Like, because Facebook owns them all. I don't know if you know that, but you're like, I hate Facebook. I'm going to Instagram. It's the same thing. They own them both.
You can connect them and everything.
Like, I don't know, privacy settings on Facebook are horrible. I'm going to Instagram. Same stuff. Facebook company. Why am I still saying these things? Please also try to, and this is something you may not have thought about, but try to concentrate on just one of the stories in your original post. I noticed that some people were trying to fit all three in there, and what I ended up getting was one kind of lame sentence about each one of the three stories instead of one detailed look at one story. So try to do that in the future. I did give you full credit. Some of you noticed, well, he said something like that, but I got a grade of a 10, so I guess I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Just this one time I'm giving you a full credit grade because you didn't know that ahead of time. But afterwards, I mean, if I just get a plot summary next, I'm going to say, it's just a plot summary, 5. And then if you do it again, I'll be like, it's still just a plot summary, 3. If you continually do the thing that I tell you not to do, it's just going to go down in points every time. And make sure you actually read the thing. It's very easy for me to tell, usually, if you haven't. There's one other thing I wanted to show you here. Is in your grades section. If you're ever curious, you're like, have I done all of my original post and my 2 replies that I have to do? Because I don't remember if I told you this, but if you don't do your original post and your 2 replies, it doesn't let me grade it. You have to do all 3. If you can't remember if you've done both replies, you're like, did I do 1 or 2? Ooh. If you go here and like next to your discussion post, it has a little pie chart, like a blue pie chart. That means you're still in progress, which means you haven't finished. If, however, you see a yellow circle with an exclamation mark in it, that means needs grading, which means it's been released to me to grade. So once you see that next to your discussion post, that means you're finished. And you don't have to do any more. Now, that won't necessarily indicate the quality of your post, just that you've done them all. Now, I did read the sample essay.
No.
I did not read the sample essay. We didn't go through it. Talk about what he was doing well. What did we do? Oh, it was a lot of questions about how does this class work again? Wasn't that it? When's the discussion post due? When's the quiz due?
When's the essay due?
The essay is due next Tuesday. I will say that some of you have emailed me and said, hey, I didn't get this discussion post done and it's gone. That's right, they all go away. Every time. If you didn't do the discussion post the first weekend, discussion post 0, discussion post 1, it's gone now. I wanted you to see this and see how it's gone on purpose, so you'd panic and think, what do I do? I can't do it again. I'm actually going to reopen this one set of discussion posts. It's the only time I'll do this. Today, probably sometime after class, and I'll leave it open until probably Friday midday. But just keep in mind that every single time the discussion posts unlock, they unlock on Thursdays after class, and they stay open only until Sunday at midnight. Then they close. Same with the quizzes. So this quiz that's still available, the syllabus quiz, future quizzes won't be like that. The moment we hit that midnight, on Sundays, it's gonna go away. So I just have this available still because it's the syllabus quiz. It's not over like any literature. It's not gonna affect our readings. The assignments will always stay up. So if you haven't done this info sheet yet, do it. The census analysis essay will be submitted here next Tuesday. And I guess now I'm going to get to the sample essay and what it does well. Y'all did remember the difference between discussion posts and census analysis essays, right? Like the main thing that differentiates them. Discussion posts, I want your opinion on the literature. But on the census analysis essay, I want your opinion on the literature and...
The personal experience. Kind of do.
And the reason I have that personal experience is so that it will do what?
Connect.
Connect to what?
Like why your experiences made you feel that way about the book.
Yes. Why you feel what you feel about it, using your personal experiences and things you've gone through. We didn't talk about this at all. We didn't do the sample essay at all? Okay. It's got to be 600 words. It's only 2 pages, double-spaced. Each one of these 3 is like that. Did I tell you how to know what you can write about?
Yes, you marked all of the ones in green.
Yes. So if I open the syllabus, you can just go straight down to course calendar. Make it bigger so you can see it. Anything week 1, 2, 3, 4 can be done for it's in green, can be done for the census analysis 1. The Antigone is the only option for census analysis 2 because it's the only drama we're reading. Anything from week 6 on that's in green can be census analysis 3 because it's fiction, then a play, then poetry. And that's how I have my course set up too. All the fiction comes first, then the drama, then the poetry.
The play, we're just reading a script, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, that's an ancient Greek play. So it's not going to look like modern scripts, but essentially that's all you're reading. Did I mention that if anybody writes an essay on the lottery, and you mention the Hunger Games or Divergent, you'll automatically get a 0?
Yeah. I think you skimmed over this.
I skimmed over this part? Okay, cool.
I remember a decent amount of this.
Yeah, you were about to get on the actual thing. But you never made it that far.
We'll see if we've heard this paragraph before. And this is all the plot summary I need in this essay. Many people end up just writing me a full plot summary. I don't need that. This guy does not do that, which is great. In Nathaniel Hawthorne's story, The Birthmark, a man marries a woman with a small red birthmark on her face. Georgiana had always liked it until her husband Aylmer grew to hate it. And since he was a scientist, he became obsessed with thinking of ways he could remove the blemish so that she could finally be perfect. But I think he misses the point of perfection. That's as much as I need in terms of plot summary. Do y'all feel like you kind of get the story now? Lady has a birthmark, marries a scientist. He's like, I bet I can get rid of that. And then there's some sort of thematic elements that are involved that make it...
Not very good.
Huh?
He's probably not very good.
Yeah, he doesn't sound like he's a good guy, right? I mean, you get that even from the just introduction. Mark?
I was just thinking the synopsis is just how you understood the story for your purpose of whatever review you're writing.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially your own version of a summary. You don't have to go find an official summary somewhere. It's just whatever you're going to be talking about, that serves your purposes. I do not want 2 pages of you summarizing the whole plot line by line. It's really boring. I want your opinion. So he says, this is it, real quick. And then he adds what feels like he's trying to make a thesis there. I think he misses the point of perfection. I don't know that you necessarily have to do that. This is a weird paper, way weirder than anything you wrote in 1301, because you don't have to have a thesis that ties everything together. This is whatever you find interesting. So it's like I found something interesting from this part of the story, maybe this other part. Oh, now I kind of feel like I want to tie this stuff together. Here's my personal experience. Maybe I don't have a personal experience on this one, but I'll have an experience in the next one. It doesn't all have to be one perfectly structured linear paper. It can jump around the story, whatever it is you feel like talking about at the time. So it's strange compared to what you wrote in 1301, I guess. It's also all in first person, very opinionated. Can talk about religion. if that's part of the personal experiences that have shaped your thoughts. Unlike in 1301 where I said no religion, because you're making logical arguments. That's not quite what we're doing here. Now, there are some things that he does at times that I don't like, which I will point out to you, which is one of the reasons I have this as a sample paper. He says here, Aylmer said that truth often finds its way to the mind close muffled in robes of sleep to prove his point that he had a right to hate the birthmark. But it wasn't a dream that made Aylmer hate the birthmark, it was his own wicked heart. Instead of showing the truth, I think dreams are fiction because people would react in a different way in real life situations. Of all the dreams I have had, I cannot think of one that made me figure out the truth about something. Some dreams are too good to be realistic, some are unbelievable, and some are vivid and scary at times, but I never found any truth I could use in my everyday life. Sometimes when it comes to interpretation, I could give people the benefit of the doubt. That's a confusing sentence that he chose. Truth often finds its way to the mind close muffled in robes of sleep. I actually think that what the author is talking about there personally is the subconscious, is that we subconsciously will think a thing to be true. Think about the fact that if you see a shady character and you're walking down the street with your kid, you may not even notice you're doing it, but you'll take your arm and wrap it around your kid. You think the stranger walking on the street next to you is going to grab your kid if you don't put your arm around him? No. It's a weird subconscious decision you make in that moment that this guy, he looks like he could beat somebody up. He's got that walk. Maybe I just grab my kid a little closer. And it's not something you even consciously think of. It's just something that you do in the moment. Like I might hold my kid real close if I go to Dallas because I know that the city is scary, right? And they're just people like me just in a city setting. Maybe it's the fact that there are just more people there that I'm more likely to get attacked or something. Maybe it's the fact that when I got out of my car, I noticed a homeless guy asked me for money immediately. And I'm just like, this doesn't happen in Greenville. This is different. But our mind kind of has those thoughts that introduce themselves without really us knowing where they come from. And I think that's what he's talking about here. Not literal sleep. Not like we only come up with truth when we dream. I don't think he's saying that. But it's a tough sentence, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt despite the fact that I don't think that's what the author's talking about. The one thing I don't really like that he's doing is he's saying he's never figured out anything from a dream, but he doesn't give an example of a time when a dream didn't pan out in his real life. He just says, I've never had a dream that made me do that. So I don't know, it's kind of vague. Hopefully he gives me a life experience that explains his thoughts at some point. He says, Aylmer's helper Aminadab displayed wisdom when he said, if she were my wife, I would never part with that birthmark. He wasn't a scientist like Aylmer. He thought the birthmark was minor and wouldn't want to remove it because he liked her the way she was and how unique it made her. Birthmark was minor, and you have to look past it for who she is as a person and not just something on her face. Aminadab, unlike Aylmer, understood that. Again, he's expressing an opinion here. I just don't know why. Like, what personal experiences cause you to think this way? He still needs to do that, and I'm getting kind of worried he won't. He says, toward the end of the story, Georgiana states that life is but a sad possession to those who have attained precisely the degree of moral advancement at which I stand. Being what I find myself, methinks I am of all mortals most fit to die. It's ridiculous that she's willing to die over somebody else's perception of her birthmark. In the beginning of the story, she found it to be so essential to her character. But at the insistence of someone who finds fault in it, she is suddenly willing to risk death to remove it. There's no way something so minor should bring such distress. Life is way too short to stress over something so small, as I'm well aware. In high school, I worried about what people thought about my body type or whether I was overweight. In the end, nobody really cared, but it brought me a ton of undue stress. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. He's saying, I feel this way because of the personal experience that I've had thinking about something that I was self-conscious about, just like the person in the story was kind of self-conscious about the birthmark once they were made to be. He's like, but I realized it didn't really matter, and I wish the character in the story would have as well. So now he's giving me a personal experience. Now, he does something that I usually don't like for students to do. So if you're fine with doing just the personal experiences and that's what I've gone through this, or this is what my family's like, so that's why I feel this way, that's fine. He incorporated other literature, in this case films. In his case, though, he did it really well by deepening the existing conversation. He's not just saying, hey, look, the lottery, that reminds me of the Hunger Games. Because that's what sometimes people do. The birthmark reminds me of that other movie about that chick that had the birthmark. Remember that? And then you're not making the discussion any deeper. But I want you to make it deeper if you do it. So he says here, Over the course of the story, I also found myself becoming increasingly irritated over the importance placed on science above humanity. That's something he hasn't talked about so far. Science above humanity is what Elmer wants to do. He's more concerned with getting rid of the birthmark. He just can't think of anything else just to see if he can get away with it. It reminds me of Jurassic Park when the mathematician says everyone was so excited thinking about whether or not they could that nobody took the time to stop and think about whether or not they should. Hawthorne really encapsulates this idea throughout the story, since Elmer has no justification for risking a human life just to see if he can achieve something. So that's something he hadn't talked about yet, science above humanity. Additionally, he brings up a new thought here. This reminds me of Gattaca. You ever even heard of that movie? It's an old sci-fi movie. I watched all the time when I was younger. That movie, everyone has the ability to choose what genetic features they want their children to have. And it calls into question whether or not humanity should have the right to choose what features like eye color or birthmarks or even mental retardation should be given to their unborn children. The movie basically decided that no matter what genes people are born with, whether or not they are supposedly inferior genes, they're equal as people in reality. And Elmer might miss that point, but Hawthorne definitely intends for us to see. So in this case, he kind of moves it to a discussion of like, if we could change something about people, would we? And he moves it into a new type of discussion that he wasn't really talking about before. If you try to bring in literature, that's how I want you to do it. Like, it should change the nature of the discussion you're having, not just be like, oh, and there's this movie I watched one time that also has a spaceship, just like this has a spaceship. Isn't that cool? Like, that's not how I want you using references. Mostly just use your personal experiences. That should be fine. Y'all have a great day. See you on Thursday. We'll probably just talk about the literature on Thursday.